Hey everyone, welcome. I am absolutely thrilled to have you here for this explainer. If you've been working in the Java ecosystem lately, you already know a massive shift has happened. So today, our main goal is demystifying the Spring Boot 3 migration. We're going to take what can honestly feel like a daunting, giant mountain of breaking changes, and we're transforming it into a highly practical, actionable roadmap. So get comfortable, focus in, and let's get ready to upgrade your projects.
Okay, let's dive into this, because this number right here, this is your hard baseline. 17, specifically Java 17. You literally cannot run Spring Boot 3 on Java 8 or Java 11. It's just fundamentally impossible. So, before you even think about upgrading dependencies or messing with your configurations, your entire project ecosystem, and yes, that includes your build tools and CI/CD pipelines, must be moved to at least Java 17. It's the absolute minimum requirement that actually makes all the modern features we're about to look at possible.
So, here's our roadmap for today. First, the big leap forward. Second, goodbye Java's Hello Jakarta. Third, rethinking security. Fourth, modern observability. Then we'll look under the hood and finish up with your migration checklist.
All right, Section 1, the big leap forward. Baseline requirements.
So Spring Boot 2 has been our reliable workhorse for a long time, right? It was great at accommodating those older Java 8 and 11 environments. But Spring Boot 3 is a completely different beast. Because it's built natively on Spring Framework 6, it strictly requires modern JVM support. And listen, this isn't just some arbitrary version bump. It's a foundational redesign. They basically shed all that legacy baggage so we can fully leverage modern Java features.
Moving right along to Section 2. Goodbye javax, hello Jakarta. The biggest change. And this brilliantly illustrates what is, make no mistake, the single biggest change you're going to face in this entire migration, moving from Java EE to Jakarta EE10. An import like javax.persistence.entity must literally be rewritten as jakarta.persistence.entity. Think about a real-time use case, like your core user or order JPA entities. Every single one of those needs this update. This exact package-level shift impacts your validation annotations, your servlet APIs, basically the whole shebang. You're going to be doing a ton of find and replace in your IDE, and you absolutely must make sure that every enterprise library you rely on has also made this jump to Jakarta.
Now, because of this Jakarta shift, your underlying dependencies are taking a massive leap too. We're jumping straight from Hibernate 5x to Hibernate 6x. But hey, there's a silver lining here. You're not just doing busy work for compatibility. Hibernate 6 brings significantly improved SQL generation. If you've got complex database joins for reporting or heavy data processing, you're going to see a noticeably better type system and much more efficient queries right out of the box.
Okay, Section 3, Rethinking Security, Configuration Overhaul.
We all know updating security is a huge pain point for developers. It's tough. So if you take only one thing away from this section, let it be the answer to this question. Where did Web Security Configure Adapter go? Well, it's gone. Completely removed. No way around it. If your current app relies on extending this class to set up HTTP security, it is going to immediately break upon upgrading.
Let's look at the code level. We're actually shifting away from inheritance and moving to composition. Instead of extending an adapter and overriding a configure method, you now declare a @bean of type security filter chain. It's pretty cool, actually. Imagine you're securing a modern REST API. You simply pass the HTTP object into your bean, chain all your authorization rules together, build it, and return it. Once you get the hang of it, it's honestly much cleaner and highly modular.
Which brings us to Section 4, modern observability, upgrading actuator and tracing.
Spring Boot 3 completely reimagines how we monitor our apps in production. In the past, if you wanted distributed tracing, those crucial trace and span IDs that tie all your microservices together, you almost certainly use Spring Cloud Sleuth. Well, scratch that. Sleuth is entirely replaced now by Micrometer Tracing. You're moving directly from that older tracing model into a unified, totally modern observability model under the Micrometer umbrella. All of this is powered by the new Micrometer Observation API. It basically merges metrics, logging, and tracing into one single cohesive API. Consider a real-world use case for a second, tracking a user checkout request that hits your inventory, your payment, and your shipping microservices. With this new API, just updating your actuator dependencies plugs you into a framework-wide standard. It makes tracking that specific request across incredibly complex architectures surprisingly seamless.
All right, Section 5,
Under the hood, performance and configuration.
We've talked a lot about the breaking changes, but here are the rewards. Spring Boot 3 introduces really strong support for AOT, or ahead-of-time compilation, specifically geared toward GraalVM native images. Now, what's really interesting about this is how AOT fixes the slower startup issues of older architectures. Before, Spring had to do a ton of reflection and class path scanning at startup, which, let's be real, made it slow. AOT does all that heavy lifting at build time instead. The result? Insanely fast startup times and dramatically lower memory usage. It is an absolute game changer if you're deploying to serverless environments or Kubernetes.
Also under the hood, Spring Boot 3 enforces much stricter configuration property binding. I do want to give you a quick, helpful warning here. Imagine you have a tiny typo in your application.yaml that Spring Boot 2 was just quietly ignoring. Well, in Spring Boot 3, that same typo is going to throw an exception and fail your application right on startup. It might be slightly annoying the first time it happens, for sure, but it actually forces you to identify configuration issues early in development rather than debugging weird ghost behavior in production later on.
Finally, Section 6, Migration Checklist, your final action plan.
Let's turn everything we just talked about into an actionable two-phase plan. Phase 1 is code and dependencies. First things first, secure that Java 17 baseline and bump your boot version to 3.x. Second, execute that massive find and replace from JX to Jakarta. Third, upgrade your Hibernate and JPA dependencies. Fourth, and I say this with full sympathy for the inevitable pain it causes, update those third-party libraries. If they haven't moved to Jakarta EE 10 yet, they will break your app. And finally, clean up any deprecated APIs.
Then we have Phase 2, configuration and testing. Start by rewriting your security logic to use that component-based security filter chain. Then swap out Spring Cloud Sleuth for Micrometer Tracing. Make sure you validate your application properties so that stricter binding doesn't trip you up. And remember, when you run your test suites, you're going to be dealing with newer versions of JUnit, Mockito, and Spring Test, so expect a few adjustments there. Finally, test your Docker or Kubernetes deployments, especially if you're taking advantage of those awesome new AOT native images.
So, we've covered the baseline shift to Java 17, the massive Jakarta migration, the security overhaul, and those incredible performance gains from AOT compilation. It is a significant amount of work, I won't lie to you, but the architectural and performance payoffs are absolutely game-changing. So, I'm going to leave you with this final provocative thought to consider as you look at your own projects today. Is your code base ready for the Jakarta era? Thank you so much for learning with me today, and best of luck on your migration journey.